Welcome to Pragmatic Talks, a podcast and video series where we discuss startups, contemporary digital product development, modern technologies, and product management. I am Wiktor Żolnowski, a CEO of Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. For today's episode, we invited Simon Dawson, Head of Engineering at Atom Bank, a fast-growing challenger bank from UK. We will discuss Atom Bank's history, how they managed to become a competitor to old, well-established banks in just a few years, what were their biggest challenges during the scaling process, what is the role of head of engineering, and who should hire such a role. So, welcome everyone. Today we are hosting Simon Dawson, who is head of engineering at Atom Bank. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Victor.
It's a pleasure to host you here. The very first question that I always ask is, who is Simon Dawson?
Yeah, well, so as you say, head of engineering at Atom Bank. I've worked in technology for an awful long time, over 25 years. So since leaving university, I graduated, and the first job I did was working for a bank, a big bank in the UK. I joined their graduate IT program, as it was, and then I then sort of moved into different industries. So I left banking and moved into manufacturing. Moved into healthcare. Then I worked for a very big SI for a long time. And during that time, I worked on a lot of different client accounts, a lot of UK government work, and a lot of financial services work. But I've been at Atom Bank for 5 years, and I've enjoyed the experience and the journey that we've been on as a bank.
We are going to talk about this today. So.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Atom Bank.
Sure. So Atom Bank, or a UK-only bank, we are a mobile-only bank, which is not revolutionary now, but it was revolutionary in 2014, 2015 when the bank was launched. At the time, we were the first bank in the UK which was mobile app only. So any customer who wanted to bank with Atom had to download our app from the App Store or the Play Store. And, since then, our ethos has really been about, how can we create a bank that is as customer-centric as possible? How can we pay our savers the best savings rate we can and give our borrowers the lowest rate we can, which is kind of the opposite for most banks. So we are trying to do something different and trying to disrupt the market. As I say, Atom's been around since 2014, 2015. We launched to a very small customer base and a very small product base. What we do today, we still don't have huge numbers of products. We focus largely on personal savings, so savings accounts which are either fixed by their rate and their term, or instant access, where you essentially can save your money and you can pull your money in and out and move your in and out as much as you can. So more transactional type banking. We also do mortgages. So mortgages for residential customers, so people who want to buy homes. We do loans. We do business loans, and that's about it. It's not a huge product range. It's a very simple business model. We've got some really great customer ratings. So I don't know if you know, but we're a 5-star rated app on Android and iOS, and we're 4.8 on Trustpilot. So our customers obviously like us. We're doing something right.
So what distinguishes your bank from other banks, that especially what makes you so successful in terms of the customer trust and this kind of rating of your app?
I think it's so our CEO was talking to us about this last week, and I think it's the fact we are trying to do things differently. So when interest rates go up, we pass on the interest rate rise to customers immediately.
Okay.
Most banks don't do that.
Yeah.
They do something called lead lag, which is they will pass on the rate, but they will wait. And in the period they wait, they will make quite a lot of money. So in the UK, the Bank of England raised interest rates last Thursday at midday. At 10 p.m. last Thursday, we'd already raised our interest rates for all of our products. No bank does that. So the technology allows us to do that. And I'm sure other banks have the technology to allow them to do that, but it doesn't always transpire that happens. So I think that's a differentiator. Banks trust Atom. And also on the mortgages side, we try to be as competitive as possible. So we're not we're trying to create a product range where we are competitive around what we're charging people to borrow money at. So there's those two things, but there's also ease of use. So we spent a lot of time in the last 2 years working on the app in terms of trying to make that app, in terms of the look and feel and the usability of the app as easy as possible. And I think if you look at the App Store ratings, the Play Store ratings and Trustpilot, you can see that it's very easy to open an account and fund an account. So those things combined, I think, give us a fairly unique proposition in the market. And it is, it's an ethos to Atom to be as easy to use as possible for customers, whilst also being very competitive on rates.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about the mortgages. You mentioned that you want to be as much easy to use as possible, etc. So are you addressing some kind of niche of clients, or are you just addressing the broad market, and you feel that there are people in all of the segments who would like to use markets such as Atom?
So I think our current market is, in terms of our demographics, is probably a more elderly market in terms of that savings proposition, because in the UK there's a large amount of money in that sort of demographic. So that's definitely on the savings. On the mortgages side, what we want to do is enable anyone who wants to buy their first house to fund that through Atom. And we're definitely looking at different types of products. So initially we were quite risk averse around mortgages in terms of loan to value and who we would lend money to. We've changed that in recent times to increase the number of customers we have. Mortgages is an interesting one because there is no product out there in the market which is fully in-app for mortgages, and we've actually been working on a product to do that for quite some time, and we're starting to release features around that. So the whole idea of your mortgage is coming up for renewal and you want to renew your mortgage, we want to make that as easy as possible for existing customers so they don't go away and take a mortgage with another lender. So doing all that within in-app themselves, rather than having to fill in forms, be it website forms or ring contact centers, or do all of the other things, as part of the drive we want around mortgages, because there's a lot of business that we could retain. Mm-hmm. It's easier to retain business than win new business. So that is a focus for our mortgages value stream. They're working on retentions.
I mean, it's very important to mention that UK banking market is quite different from other markets in Europe, from the US and other stuff. And as far as I know, it's like there's a lot of paperwork, and what you are doing is you are digitalizing this paperwork to make it less smooth for each user, and that is something that's very
that is distinguishing, very distinguishing. And you're absolutely right, Victor. There is a lot of manual processes in particularly in mortgages. So we are trying to digitize that and make that as much in-app as possible and as easy for the customer as possible to say, oh, my mortgage is about to come to an end. Let me see what Atom can offer me for a new mortgage, and do that all within app.
So you're actually moving UK banking into the 21st century.
Trying.
Okay. So I know that you are also not only disturbing the banking products, but also you are doing some things differently in terms of how do you build this product, how do you build the bank, and there are a few things that you are doing differently with managing people and working day-to-day basis. So maybe you can tell about this idea more.
There is. So I mean, one of the big things for Atom, and it's been quite a lot in the press, certainly in the press in the UK, and actually it actually received sort of worldwide coverage when it announced, is the 4-day working week. So all of our team, whether it's our technology team, our finance team, or our legal team, our operations team, all of the bank works 4-day weeks, 4-day week, which is, it's quite revolutionary, because we've all of us have worked a 5-day week in an office-based type job forever. Mm-hmm. So when our CEO announced about 1.5 years ago that he was going to change the bank and move us all to 4-day week, we were all a bit, really? But here we are 1.5 years later, and we are working a 4-day week, and that extends to the partners we work with as well. Mm-hmm. So the Pragmatic Photos team that we work with, they also work 4-day week.
Yes, so it was also challenging for us to manage the company. The part of the company is working 4 days a week, and the part is working 5 days a week. But it was also very interesting since we can observe the differences between those two approaches and see and compare which was better. And actually, it's hard to tell which one is working better. But I wonder how does it look from your perspective? How do you rate it after some time already?
And I think there's different lenses you can look at it. So we trialed this for quite a long time. It was something we implemented, but we always implemented it with a view of we are going to trial this, and during that trial we're going to gather metrics. We're going to gather metrics across the organization. So, operational metrics for in terms of the technology metrics, people metrics, how people feel, and things like stress and sick days and all of those things. But also the impact on the customer, so ratings of the app and all this. So we've gathered all of those metrics, and broadly those metrics were positive. When we aligned the view pre 4-day to 4 days. So there was no reason not to do it. And we also surveyed our people quite regularly and took all that feedback. So I think purely on a people side, the vast majority of people really enjoy 4-day week. And they've adjusted their lives now to fit around that. So they feel, certainly from the people in sort of my team I talk to regularly, they feel Monday to Thursday is pretty tough because it's long days and you have a lot to do, but then you have a full 3-day break. And because in technology, we all have the same day off, we don't have dependencies across different teams. So that's really positive. I also think it makes you a bit more focused. So you have a shorter window of basically getting things done. So you actually are really focused on, well, what am I going to achieve this week? And actually, I can only do that up till Thursday afternoon. We can't do it on Fridays. Because there was a temptation early on to say, well, if we don't finish on Thursday, we'll work Friday. We sort of stopped that. That was a behaviour we seen, but we said, no, that isn't...
It's not a 4-day work.
That's not a contingency day. That's just a day if we have real issues and we have to call people out and fix things. So I think broadly really positive on a sort of engagement point of view. Massive difference in retention. So obviously post COVID, Atom being a very much a technology fintech company, probably experienced what most of other companies experienced, and was a lot of attrition. A lot of people were moving on doing other things. 4-day week almost stopped that overnight. So it massively helped retention, and it also helped attract really good engineers as well. But some people, depending on what stage of their life they're in, they looked at the 4-day week and think that's really an attractive thing for us. I don't really feel there's any huge negatives. I do feel that you need to be really focused Monday to Thursday, and I think people are. And you just need to be a bit more planning around your releases. So we don't, if we're going to release a new feature in production, we don't do it on a Friday. People aren't around. We don't want to take that risk. So you then have to think, well, I've got a 4-day window because your Friday is your new Saturday. So you have a 4-day window when you're going to release changes. But that isn't...
Are you releasing on Thursday?
We release on Thursday. Yeah. Not every week, but we do release on Thursday. We tend to do most of our releases Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
It's still as we spoke before that for many old banks, let's call them, considering if we should release on Friday or Tuesday or one particular day a week is something pretty unusual, because some of them, at least, or maybe not all of them, but some of them struggle to release like once a month or once a quarter. Some of them even releasing once a year. So like the problem that you have, or maybe not the problem, but actually the question that you're trying to answer, if you should release on Friday when no one is there, is actually still way in the front of your competitors.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a nice problem to have, because we have that capability to do that. We're just choosing not to because we don't have the wider team around on the Friday.
So Atom Bank is not a startup anymore. It's more like a scale of how many people do you have right now?
So the company now is around about 450. Right. So you're absolutely right. It's moved beyond that startup mentality now. In terms of the culture's changed. I mean, I've been around for almost 5 years, and I've seen a big change in that, how the culture of the organisation changed and how the organisation's matured. And the organisation is much more now on a product basis. So we're thinking more about products. So we've recently reorganized into what we call value streams. So, within the bank, we have 5 value streams, and we have mortgages, we have savings, we have business banking, enterprise, and platform. And it's not an unusual way to set yourself up in terms of, industry thinking. But we would never have been mature enough to do that 2 or 3 years ago. We're very much at that point, we were very much starting to build our team and build our platform and build our app. That's all in place. For us now, it's all around agility, speed, and scaling, but scaling safely. Reputation, brand awareness is pretty big now, so we don't want to scale in a way that it's not sustainable.
So stability of the system is something that is very important.
Massively important. We have a huge amount of metrics around customer traffic, customer volume, and in the background we're doing a huge amount of work around understanding where the constraints are in the system. So where your bottlenecks are. So we fix one constraint, we move on to the next one. And that's the way we're trying to tackle our business plan says we're going to have X number of customers in the next 5 years. Well, we want to know, can our system sustain that number of customers? At what point do we start to hit issues, and then where do we hit those issues? So it's not something we really talk about hugely outside of engineering, but that's what we're focused on massively at the moment. It's around how much does the system scale.
So how Atom Bank looked like when you joined 5 years ago? How many people was there, and less?
So when I joined 5 years ago, there would be less within the entire bank. There'd be less than 100 people. The technology team was largely outsourced. So the bank, we talk about the old bank and the new bank. The old bank was largely a managed service run by another company, and we had a very small technology team within Atom. The intent was always to build a new bank on the cloud, and at the same time build a team and build new apps. So we did that. Clearly, we've achieved that. But we had lots of things in flight at the same time. So we were, how do we move the bank from on-prem to cloud? How do we rebuild the app? Because the original app was actually written in Unity, which is a games engine, which was troublesome, was difficult to test and difficult to release frequently. So that, but also how did we build capability? Because all of the capability was for the company who looked after the existing bank. So we had all those 3 things to consider. And my role initially was, how do we move the bank to the cloud? So did some of the architecture on how we did that. And then once we started that work, it was very quickly, well, what team do we need to do the work? How do we build that team? So it was very much, build and scale in the team. And my initial team was 3 people. So myself and 2 SREs. One of them is still with us. Obviously I am. And now engineering is around about 80 people, and technology is around about 150. So it's grown pretty quickly.
Okay. Yeah, it's in terms of the full company, it's 4.5 times grow in 5 years, and in terms of the engineering, from 3 to 150 is 50 times more.
Yes. But one thing about Atom, the business model around Atom is also around scaling the bank in terms of number of customers, number of customer deposits, number of loans, but not scaling the workforce. So we're using automation. So we'll probably get to around 500 employees this year. But we're not looking to massively scale the workforce as we scale the customer base, because we want to be an automated, lean banking.
Yes, that's actually a great idea to focus, especially right now during the recession and other stuff where everyone is cutting costs and optimizing everything what's possible. I think you are in a great position to be right now to actually compete with others. In terms of the people, they already tell us a little bit more. Tell us a lot about how does it change during the time. What about the product and your product focus? What was the challenges 5 years ago or 4 or 5 years ago, and what are the challenges right now?
So 5 years ago, we weren't thinking ourselves as a product company. We were thinking around, we have an app. It's not native. we have a banking platform, it's on-prem and doesn't scale well. So it was very much a technology challenges. So, the technology wasn't able to underpin what the business wanted it to do. So we need to create a scalable banking platform. How do we do that? So move that to the cloud. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done and takes time and effort and money. But also the app itself, we needed to rewrite the app. So rewrite the app in a native way. We did that, and a couple of years ago, we started thinking, well, actually, we've done this now. The challenges are less technological. They're more around how do we align the organization? How do we align our technology team and the wider bank to, better serve the sort of underpin the business plan around the key pillars of growth, around mortgages, around savings, around business banking. So we're much more thinking like a product company, which we would never have been able to do before. And previously we only had we still had a savings and a mortgages product, but we didn't have the capability to create new product ranges. So we had a very much a fixed rate saver product, but because we knew the bank wasn't particularly scalable, we didn't want to create a product which was much more transactional, because then we would have created constraint. Like, we knew the constraints we couldn't fix on the existing bank.
So what are the current challenges? Like, what is the most challenging right now? Or maybe there are some opportunities that you are going to chase for.
The challenges now, I think, are largely around prioritization of what do we work on. Because whilst we have all of these value streams, we always have that time, cost, quality conundrum, and we only have a finite number of people, we only have a finite number of amount of money, and we don't want to compromise on quality. We've worked really hard to get the customer ratings where they are. We don't want to cut corners to basically, damage the brand. So I think it's now really the challenges at a very, very senior level in the bank are around what are the most important things we need to prioritize our finite number of resources to work on and deliver. I've got no issues that we could deliver them. We do have a few technological challenges, as I say. So there's still some constraints within the cloud platform because we didn't rebuild everything. We lifted and shifted some, older legacy technology. And we are starting to chip away at moving those. So, there's one system we've recently retired. We're looking to retire another one. And all of that is around those systems just aren't really cloud native. They're not easy to scale. They cost an awful lot of money, and they're fairly proprietary in terms of how you develop products on them. So we're doing that. And I think probably the last thing is around the agility part, around being able to quickly, proof of concept an idea and take that idea into working software. So our aim really is we need to speed up that flow. So the way we've optimized our teams is nothing to do with utilization. It's more on flow of work.
So you're optimizing time to market.
Time to market. That is exactly what we're optimizing right now. Whereas I think previously we were optimizing purely around utilization and how busy were the teams and how many story points were we doing and all of this type of stuff.
Do you think that changing to 4 days work week has an impact on that somehow?
Yes.
Like a change in your mindset in terms of, okay, so we limited the time that we have, so we shouldn't focus on the utilization anymore. We should focus on the value that we can deliver in this short time.
I think that's a very good point, Victor, and I think that's definitely something that we've observed. Because with a 4-day week, time can run away. In terms of, you're working in a sprint and you've got 8 days within this 2-week sprint rather than 10 days, and you've got, a limited window when you can release out the back of that sprint. So we are definitely thinking more around making sure that the teams have all of the skills and expertise within the team to deliver without having external dependencies, which is previously not something we paid as much attention to.
So actually adding this constraint of one day less work a week actually make you stronger and more focused, as you mentioned before.
I think so. Because I think it's really focused our minds. because, I don't think we're ever going to go back to 5-day weeks. So this is the way we are going to work.
So we need to figure out how to do this efficiently.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. This is something that I haven't thought about when considering 4 days week. Okay. I wonder if there was any impact of Brexit or COVID-19 on your day-to-day business.
So Brexit's an interesting one. I mean, the Atom app, as it stands, is a UK app. So the app's actually geo-fenced. You can't download the app if you're in Europe, which was a bit of a challenge for the Pragmatic team initially when we had the guys working on the mobile app who wanted to download the app. Yeah, so that was a challenge. But in terms of our business plan, I don't think Brexit is massively impacted it in that we were never looking to expand into other markets. It has impacted a bit on our the way in terms of our people, in terms of we have a nearshore centre in Poland, which I think has been a great success. But it's possibly more difficult to navigate. How do you turn that into being actually part of Atom versus working with Pragmatic post-Brexit? I think that's probably a bit more challenging now. But I don't think it's been a huge impact. COVID-19 has been a bigger impact. So what we initially saw with COVID was, bizarrely, it really helped Atom because the products we had at that time were products that customers were using. Savings accounts, mortgages, the UK market. And I'm not sure how the Polish market was, but the UK market was very much, everyone was locked down. They couldn't spend money on a lot of things. If they had money, they were either saving the money, and also the housing market, people were deciding to move out of the city into the country. And so the products we had it was really quite fortunate that for us as a business, we didn't get impacted at all. In fact, it was the opposite. It actually improved our business performance, but it had a huge impact on our teams because I remember at the time working on, we were actually in the middle of migrating the bank from the on-prem to the cloud. And we probably had burnout, a lot of our teams, because, again, we didn't have a lot else to do. So people were just working, and there was always lots of work. So we really came out the back of that with a lot of people feeling pretty burnt out and stressed. And then we had the whole Great Resignation. So post-COVID, a lot of remote working, a lot of really good engineers we lost to cryptocurrency companies, a lot of cybersecurity companies, a lot of my team left to one particular crypto company, and it was really difficult to lose that many good people at one point in time.
Well, what they are doing right now because of the crypto winter, that is.
Well, some of them want to come back. So that's interesting. So it had a huge impact on our capability. We went from being a very highly capable team to having a dip because we lost so much experience in a short space of time. And I spent most of 2021 almost working as a recruitment consultant, trying to rebuild a team. Then we had the 4-day week initiative, and that kind of changed. So COVID-19, massive impact. And I think it's impacted all our businesses. We no longer work in the office full time. It's very much a hybrid working environment, which I actually like, and I think the team like. But it has changed things in terms of how we work.
Okay. Maybe let's talk a little bit more about your role at Atom Bank. You're head of engineering. I believe that many people who are just starting their startup journey, they wonder what is the role of head of engineering, what are your responsibilities, and maybe some of the people who are listening us or watching would be interested if they should or when they should hire a head of engineering for their startup.
It's a really good question, and it kind of depends on where you are in your journey. So if I take the Atom example, our first engineering was probably hired or we created that role about 3 years ago, and it wasn't me at the time. I was I was leading our SRE team, but we were very siloed. What I think my role is largely around the capability of engineering. So overseeing all of we split it fairly industry standard around front-end technologies, back-end technologies, testing, and SRE. And all of those 4 areas have engineering managers, and all of those engineering managers sort of are part of the engineering leadership team alongside myself. So my role really is to make sure that the engineering practices, capabilities, disciplines that we have in the bank are as good as they can be for the bank. I don't directly work in delivery, although all of my team works in delivery. So ultimately I am accountable for delivery, but I'm not responsible for the day-to-day delivery. For me, it's about size and scale. So I think once you get to a certain size, you need to think around, well, you have a big team of developers, but actually who's actually coaching those developers, who's mentoring those developers, who's leading the developers. So you need to look at that. And that is something you need to consider, I think, when you're into double figures of developers. And we're obviously at about 80 developers. I clearly can't have one-to-ones with every developer and don't, but I do have, I will be available to discuss anything with any of the developers when they need to, but I have a team who look after each of those different areas. I'm not hands-on anymore. I do keep abreast with modern technologies because that's part of my job, to make sure that our engineering team is, as good as we can be for the bank. I'm not sat writing code. I am reviewing code, and I am reviewing coding standards, and I am reviewing SonarQube outputs and reviewing how we're doing test automation and trying to set some direction on that and looking at modern engineering practices. But I think you need to look at your sort of scale, your size, and where do you want to go with your organization? If you're very much a build versus buy, then you're going to have an engineering team. You're going to need someone to lead that engineering team.
So, in terms of scaling, what advices you would give to people who are already maybe working on their product, working on their startups, and they see that they will need to scale up their business pretty soon? How they should prepare for that? What they can do right now?
It depends on the business and what their business goals are.
So maybe there are some common mistakes that you've seen in the past, or maybe there are some things that you think that you could done better when you were like 5 years ago here.
If I think of the Atom experience I have, I think you should never lose sight of where you want to get to. So it's difficult to really think long term because so many things change, and a lot of things change that are outside your control completely. So Atom has been around for several years, and there's been lots of external influences that have impacted the way the bank is going. But I think you need to not lose sight of what your end goal is, and try and plot your way to that point. At what point do you need to hire more people? What is your strategy around your technology? At what point are you going to build versus buy in terms of the scale of, if it's a commodity, well, you're probably better off buying something, because do you really want to focus your engineering resource on building a commodity item versus building something that adds value to your business?
Innovations.
Exactly. So you work, if you work that out, you can plot at a sort of technology engineering level how you need to build and scale and grow that business. So I think you really need to sort of ask yourself the question around the build versus buy on the product side, but also what's the business goals and what do you need to do to get to the business goals. Sometimes I think when you look at, I've got a business plan, but then you do B to A planning. This is where I want to be, but actually I haven't worked out how I'm going to achieve that. So it would, in my experience, it's better to think about how you're going to achieve it rather than set these goals, because I think we in Atom have set goals in the past with the right intent, with as much information as we've had at that time. But actually, when you get further down the line, you realize those goals were never really realistic. So I think you do need to set some plot a way to hitting those business goals, rather than say, well, this is what I want to do within 12 months, and then think about how you want to do it, which is a common mistake I think we as a bank of experience. The other thing is, I think it's particularly for investor-led companies like Atom, it's very difficult to change tack and strategy, because you have investors who clearly invested money in your business and would like to, do things in a certain way, and you may want to do things in another way. So it's important, change is a constant. I think that's the only thing constant in my eyes is change.
Sure.
But don't just change for change's sake. And I think sometimes we have flip-flopped, and that has created a bit of confusion and slowed us down. It is difficult to not do that, but it's something to be aware of.
You said that it's very important to focus on goals, on setting up the goals for startup. In terms of the goals, what are Atom Bank goals right now, or where do you want to see Atom Bank in the next 5 to 10 years?
Good question. So I think the main goal for Atom, and this is something we've talked about publicly, is an IPO. So I think it's no secret that we want to flow the company, and we want to do that certainly within the next 5 years. I think ideally within the next 2. But a lot of that is not dependent on Atom's performance. Clearly, that is important, but it depends on the market conditions. I think, possibly we would have been closer to that goal than we are if the world economy had not suffered the way it has in the last year and a half. So that's certainly the number one goal. I think the other goal would be to increase our savings balances, increase the number of customers, increase the number of mortgages we provide to our customers, increase the number of business loans. So grow the bank, scale the bank. From a technology point of view, we've built the bank to scale. We're pretty confident we can handle more customers, we can handle more volume. We now need to create the products and to get those customers. And I'm happy to say the bank is growing quite fast.
So in the next 5 to 10 years, you would like to have like a bigger bank?
Bigger bank. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, the bank will be probably a medium-sized bank in the UK. And I wouldn't like to say how many customers that would be, or the size of the sort of balances and deposits, but I think we'll be classed as a medium-sized bank.
Cool. It's actually a quite fast journey since Atom Bank was started 2000s.
Well, yeah, if you look at, I think within 10 years we'll have gone from nothing to a medium-sized bank.
It's awesome. Sure.
And possible flotation.
It's great. Okay, so you've been already working for some time with Pragmatic Coders, so actually for a second brand, NXType, which is more focused on build, operate, transfer for scale-ups. Was there anything that surprised you when you started working with our team?
What surprised me the most was actually how easy it was. So obviously we selected Pragmatic to work with us. We went through a selection process, and you guys were, which is great. And then we started the whole process of, well, these are the type of roles we need to fill. So Pragmatic, can you go in, find these people and interview them, and then we'll interview them. And that was quick. It was really quite quick at how we did that. But then the onboarding process, which had some teeth and challenges, because it's not easy to do, to onboard, a group of people in Poland into a UK company, in a company that we'd never done that before. We had a few teeth and challenges, but once we'd overcome those, that again was quite, I think was quite smooth and quite quick for the teams to get up to speed and start bonding with other teams. But I've been impressed by the quality of the people who are working. And I know a lot of my colleagues in the UK feel the same. So we've got some really good engineers now who we really rely on. And I think the relationship with Pragmatic's good. So I think it's been very, very easy working with Pragmatic, and not, I think sometimes in these relationships you can get caught up in red tape and bureaucracy, and I'd like to think we haven't done that. It's been a much more pragmatic, pardon the pun, relationship.
It wasn't easy to dive into this bureaucracy, but we managed this together.
I think we've managed to avoid most of it and focus on what was the real goal, which was actually really quickly building a team which will increase our capability.
So maybe you have some advices for people who may be looking such as services, like as you said, that focusing on what to build on site, what to outsource, or what to actually buy on somewhere else. So maybe you have some advices for startup founders or people who are managing startups. What to focus on when selecting the partners for such an endeavor, and how to select them, what to look for.
Big thing for me is cultural fit. So we've worked with some big companies, really big companies. Atamont, a huge company, and that hasn't worked out that well. I've worked for some huge companies, so I know how those companies operate, and I think you need to think around cultural fit, and because where we've fallen into the trap of working with some of the bigger companies, the brochureware is fantastic, but the actual people that you get to work with you, because we're a smallish company, you're not getting the real top talent from that company, so the experience is not great. So I think you need to think about cultural fit and around what type of skills are you looking for, and does that company who you're looking at, do they have expertise? Do they have credentials? Big thing for me is about credentials. I think I do a lot of business in the UK with people who I've worked with previously. A lot of my team I've worked with and in other places, and it's a known quantity. You know what you're getting. You know that these people can do the job. So I think when you're looking at working with third parties, you need to look at what's their credentials, and actually, do they have credentials in the industry that you're operating in? Because a fintech company working in banking is very different to a technology company providing streaming services. Very different.
Quite a difference.
Very different. So you kind of, even though there may be a technology fit in terms of the skill sets of the people, is there a fit around the environment that they work in, how regulated banking is? So that's important. It's really important.
We see this since we have a lot of clients from fintech, we see that how important it is to actually be aware of some regulations, and sometimes even our clients are not aware of that, so we need to guide them on that. The same with digital health or medtech companies that we are working with. Like, there's plenty of regulations and some things that cannot be done the same way as, for example, in social media platforms or streaming or whatever, so e-commerce.
For sure, yeah.
So you said the culture, the size of the company matters actually?
It does. It really does, because I don't, I've had a few, I've had a few experiences with very large companies working with Atom, and it hasn't been great. And I think it's because we were not a large enough company in terms of to be as important to get access to the right people.
So that might be the point. You also mentioned the credentials. What else, and how to assess it, how to test the potential partner before you start working with them?
Well, I mean, our standard, which is probably no different to most places, is we would go out with an RFP type process where we'd ask a number of questions, and we'd ask the companies to come, provide responses to those questions, and then we would score those independently across the team. But we'd also do a lot of research on who are those companies working for, who have the has anyone in our business actually worked with them before, because that counts for a lot as well. And just to try and get a general feel of what have they done, because the actual look and feel of a company from a brochure in terms of the website or whatever other social media comms versus what they actually delivered is important. Have they got a reputation for delivery? Because ultimately, when you're working with a partner, you want them to deliver something for you. So it's important to look behind, but try and look beyond the veneer and see what actually have they done.
At the end of the day, you're paying for delivering value.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've done a good job with Pragmatic, because I am happy with what we've achieved together. And interestingly, I wasn't involved in the bid process, so I wasn't involved in any of the selection. So I came in and managed the relationship once you guys were selected. So
I think I went through all of my list, and we have like a few other side topics that we already covered. So Simon, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm pretty sure that what we talk about today will be very beneficial for people who are working on startups right now, and anyone who is working on the product development, and especially people who are going to scale their business or maybe are already struggling with scaling it. So thank you very much, and I hope we'll repeat it sometime again.
I'm sure we will, Victor, and thank you for having me in Krakow. As you know, I always like to come visit you in Krakow.
You're always welcome here. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. Pragmatic Talks is delivered to you by Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. Be sure to catch all new episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast channels. And if you are thinking about building your own startup or struggling with product development, contact us and find out what we can do together.